The void of space rippled as reality itself seemed to tear open. A massive silhouette emerged from the darkness, its outline familiar, yet changed, the unmistakable form of a Commonwealth dreadnought, but altered in ways that defied explanation. The HSS Retribution had returned. For 60 years, the ship had been more legend than memory, the pride of humanity's fleet, presumed destroyed in the catastrophic battle of Proxima Centauri. Thousands of memorial services had been held across human colonies. Captain Jiwoo Park and her crew of 300 had been declared heroes, their names etched on monuments throughout Commonwealth space. Yet here they were. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Park stood with perfect posture, her uniform immaculate despite being 6 decades out of regulation. Most striking was her face. She appeared exactly as she had in her last transmission before the ship's supposed destruction. Not a day older, not a new line on her face. "Status report," Park commanded, her voice steady as though they had been on a routine patrol. Commander Do-hyun Kim, her executive officer, glanced up from his console. "Commonwealth border stations have detected us, Captain. They're broadcasting identification requests on all standard channels. And the Zendari." Kim's lips thinned. 3 patrol vessels within sensor range have already jumped to FTL. They're running. A small smile touched Park's face, as they should. The Retribution drifted forward, its massive hull now covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. What had once been standard ablative armor now resembled something organic, almost alive. Sections of the hull occasionally phased slightly out of sync with reality, becoming translucent before solidifying again. At Tactical, Lieutenant Hannah Gill monitored the Commonwealth's response. "Captain, they're scrambling. 17 warships are converging on our position. Defense platforms are powering weapons systems." "Expected," Park replied. "They think we're a trick, a Zendari trap." "Should we power weapons?" Kim asked. "No, we didn't come back to fight humans." Park's eyes remained fixed on the main view screen. "Send the verification codes, all of them, even the obsolete ones." The bridge crew worked in eerie synchronization, their movements precise and efficient beyond standard training. Many had subtle physical alterations, eyes that reflected light differently, skin with faint geometric patterns visible only at certain angles. "Communications blackout, except for high command requests," Park ordered. "Nothing leaves this ship without my authorization." As they approached the Commonwealth defensive line, sensors aboard the nearest human outpost went wild. The Retribution's wake contained energy readings that defied classification. Streams of particles that shouldn't exist in our universe trailed behind the warship like cosmic breadcrumbs. Inside his laboratory bay, Science Officer Junho Lee studied the readings from the Commonwealth ships, scanning them. "They're confused," he reported with amusement. "Their instruments can't make sense of us." 6 decades of technological advancement wouldn't explain what they're seeing, Kim noted. 6 decades for them, Park corrected quietly. "For us?" She didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. Everyone on the bridge understood what they had experienced was beyond conventional time. The Commonwealth Defense Fleet maintained formation as the Retribution approached. Aboard the fleet flagship, Admiral Tae-woo Jin watched in disbelief as the legendary ghost ship moved with impossible grace for its size. "It can't be the actual Retribution," his tactical officer insisted. "The hull configuration is wrong. The energy signature is wrong. Everything is wrong." Yet the verification codes were perfect, even the emergency protocols that had never been used in actual combat. Codes that only Captain Park would know. The Zendari response was telling. Within hours of the Retribution's appearance, their diplomatic channels went silent. Their border stations began evacuating. The species that had claimed victory over humanity's greatest warship was reacting with unmistakable fear. As the Retribution passed the 5th planet in the system, the space around it briefly warped. Sensors on nearby ships recorded a momentary timeline distortion, as though the ship existed simultaneously in several different moments before snapping back to the present. In her private quarters, Captain Park removed a small device from a hidden compartment. It projected a three-dimensional star map of Zendari space with detailed information about military installations that hadn't existed when the Retribution disappeared. "They thought they finished us," she whispered to the empty room. "They never understood what their weapon did to us." The door chimed. Commander Kim entered, carrying a data crystal. "The Zendari Supreme Command just ordered a full military mobilization. Every ship, every soldier." Park nodded. "They remember what we were. They have no concept of what we've become." Outside, strange lights danced along the Retribution's hull as repair systems worked on a molecular level. Small robotic drones, unlike any Commonwealth design, occasionally emerged from recessed bays to perform adjustments before disappearing back inside. As the ship entered the inner system, Commonwealth citizens gathered at observation decks and viewports throughout nearby stations. Many wept at the sight of the legendary vessel. Children who had grown up hearing stories of the Retribution's final stand now witnessed its impossible return. The ship's request was simple: direct communication. With human high command, nothing more. But as the Retribution moved through space, reality itself seemed to bend slightly around it. Sensor buoys in its path recorded brief glimpses of alternate versions of the ship, sometimes damaged, sometimes configured differently, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Whatever had happened to the HSS Retribution and its crew during those 60 years, they had returned changed. And the galaxy would never be the same. The secure conference room aboard Commonwealth Station Alpha had been cleared of all personnel except for Admiral Sunwoo Lee and his personal security detail. The station's automated defenses tracked the Retribution's shuttle as it docked, its unusual propulsion system leaving no heat signature, despite the obvious power it contained. Captain Park stepped through the airlock alone. She wore her formal uniform, the old style from 60 years ago, yet it seemed to shift subtly under the station lights as if the fabric itself couldn't decide which moment in time it belonged to. "Captain Park," Admiral Lee said, his voice tight with emotion, "when I was a cadet I wrote my thesis on your final battle." Park's smile was polite but distant. "It seems reports of our destruction were premature." The Admiral gestured toward the conference table. "The High Command is demanding answers. The Zendari ambassador has already filed formal protests claiming we've violated peace treaties by concealing a superweapon." "Peace treaties?" Park's expression darkened. "With the Zendari, 15 years ago, after the Third Border War." Park sat down, placing a small device on the table. It projected a holographic display showing the Battle of Proxima Centauri, but from angles no Commonwealth record contained. The final moments played out. The Retribution charging the Zendari flagship, the strange weapon firing, the brilliant flash. "What you couldn't see was what happened next," Park said quietly. "Their weapon wasn't designed to destroy us. It was designed to remove us from the timeline entirely." The hologram shifted, showing the Retribution caught in a sphere of distorted space-time. "We were thrown into what Science Officer Kang calls a temporal fracture. For the galaxy, 60 years passed. For us..." Park paused. "Time became complicated." The door slid open as 3 more officers from the Retribution entered. Science Officer Minji Kang carried what looked like a standard data tablet, except its components seemed to float slightly apart from each other. Lieutenant Hyun-ki Yoon, the weapons specialist, wore gloves that occasionally glitched out of sync with the rest of reality. Commander Do-yeon Kim's eyes reflected light, with an unusual prismatic effect. "Show him," Park ordered. Kang activated her device. The room darkened as a new hologram formed, not just visual, but somehow tangible. Admiral Lee gasped as he felt himself standing on the surface of an alien world. "This is the Zendari homeworld," Kang explained. "Not as it is now, but as we witnessed it in 17 different timelines." The scene shifted to massive underground complexes, where thousands of Zendari scientists worked on weapons of planetary destruction. In one chamber, biological agents targeted specifically to human DNA were being cultured in vats large enough to contaminate entire atmospheres. "In the temporal fracture, we experience countless alternate timelines," Kang continued. In 82% of them, the Zendari launched a surprise extinction campaign against humanity within 20 years of our disappearance. In 12%, they waited longer but still struck. In only 6% of potential futures did they actually maintain peace. Admiral Lee's face had gone pale. This is hard to believe. Lieutenant Yoon stepped forward. Permission to demonstrate, Captain. Park nodded. Yoon removed his glove and placed his bare hand on the Admiral's desk terminal. The station's supposedly secure systems immediately responded to him, screens flickering with data too fast for normal human perception. Your security protocols have 17 critical vulnerabilities, Yoon said matter-of-factly. I could disable this entire station with a thought. To prove his point, the lights dimmed briefly before returning to normal. During our time in the fracture, Park explained, we didn't just observe. We lived through these timelines, we died in these timelines, and we evolved. Commander Kim approached with a small container. Inside was what appeared to be a simple metal cube. This contains approximately 1 cubic centimeter of the material now comprising our hull, Kim said. It has a molecular structure that exists partially out of phase with normal space-time. Your scientists can study it, though I doubt your instruments can analyze it fully. The cube seemed to blur when viewed directly, as if the eye couldn't quite focus on its true form. Admiral Lee struggled to process what he was seeing. If what you're saying is true, how long did you experience in this fracture? The 4 officers exchanged glances. Subjectively, Park's voice grew quiet. For some of us, thousands of years. For others, more. Time looped, branched, overlapped. We lived lifetimes in moments, experienced decades in seconds. Kang's tablet displayed new images, the Zendari Supreme Command planning sessions where they coldly calculated the most efficient method to eliminate humanity. We watched them plan our extinction over and over, Kang said. We memorized their strategies, their contingencies. We know what they're going to do before they do. And we've prepared accordingly, Yoon added, his eyes glinting with something that wasn't quite human anymore. Admiral Lee studied Captain Park carefully. Your crew, how have they coped with this experience? We're still human, Park insisted, though something in her tone suggested this was a matter of ongoing debate among the crew. Changed, yes. The human mind wasn't designed to experience multiple timelines simultaneously. We've adapted. To demonstrate, Kang manipulated her tablet, and suddenly Admiral Lee saw multiple versions of the conference room superimposed on each other, versions where different decisions led to different conversations playing out simultaneously. This is how we perceive reality now, Kang explained, mercifully shutting off the overwhelming display. Every possibility, every branch, every outcome. Admiral Lee leaned back, overwhelmed. The High Command will want proof of these Zendari plans. Which is why we've returned, Park said firmly, not just to warn you, but to help you prepare. Yoon placed a data crystal on the table. These are designs for defensive systems based on technology we acquired during our experience. They can be constructed with existing Commonwealth resources. And the retribution itself? Lee asked carefully. Park's expression became unreadable. The ship has become something more than a vessel, something beyond what its designers intended. We're still discovering its full capabilities. As if to emphasize her point, the lights in the room flickered again, but this time it wasn't Yoon's demonstration. Through the viewport, they could see the distant retribution briefly shift, its outline becoming multiple overlapping versions of itself before snapping back to a single form. We're not just warning you about a threat, Admiral, Park said softly. We're offering humanity a future. The question is whether you're ready for what that future holds. Dr. Taeyong Choi drummed his fingers nervously on the observation deck railing. Behind the reinforced viewport, a team of Commonwealth scientists in protective suits circled a fragment of the Retribution's hull plating. The metal, if it could still be called that, occasionally rippled like water despite being solid to the touch. Try the quantum resonance scanner again, Dr. Choi instructed through his comlink. Adjust for temporal variance. A junior researcher aimed the device at the sample. The scanner sparked violently and went dark. Third one this morning. It's rejecting our attempts to analyze it, the researcher reported, frustrations evident in her voice. It's like the material actively resists being measured. Choi sighed. In his 30 years as the Commonwealth's lead physicist, he'd never encountered anything like the retribution. The ship violated fundamental laws of physics that had been considered immutable. Behind him, the door slid open as Captain Park entered, accompanied by Flight Officer Jisoo Han. "Any progress, Doctor?" Park asked. "Progress?" Choi laughed without humor. "Your ship is rewriting our understanding of reality. The hull material exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously. It's both solid and fluid, present and absent." He gestured helplessly at his data tablet. "My instruments can't decide if it's matter or energy or something else entirely." Flight Officer Han gave a small, knowing smile. "It's neither, and both. The material adapts to what it needs to be." Choi stared at her. "That's not possible. 6 months ago, our time, I would have agreed with you," Han replied. Her eyes darted around the room, tracking things that weren't visible to others. She'd been the Retribution's best pilot before the temporal incident. Now her reflexes operated at speeds that made her movements appear almost precognitive. "We've prepared a demonstration," Captain Park said, changing the subject. "The Commonwealth Science Council requested proof of our capabilities." "What kind of demonstration?" Choi asked warily. Before Park could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as the automated defense system activated. "Perfect timing," Park remarked casually. "The Zendari decided to provide us with test subjects." The main view screen activated, showing a formation of Zendari warships, sleek predatory vessels with distinctive crimson hulls, dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system. 16 ships in total, including a dreadnought. "This is a battle group," Choi gasped. "They're violating the treaty." Park nodded to Han. "Ready for your part?" The flight officer straightened her uniform and headed for the door. "The Retribution is already responding. I'll coordinate from the bridge." On the view screen, the massive human warship was moving to intercept the Zendari fleet, accelerating to speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. No support ships accompanied it. No Commonwealth vessels had time to join the defense. "You're sending one ship against 16, Choi asked incredulously. "Watch," Park said simply. Aboard the Retribution, Flight Officer Han settled into her control chair. What had once been a standard pilot station now resembled something organic, the controls reshaping themselves to her touch. As her hands made contact with the interface, her consciousness expanded into the ship's systems. "Zendari vessels have locked weapons," reported Communications Officer Yeonjung Ryu from her station. Unlike traditional comms officers, Ryu no longer needed equipment to intercept signals. Her brain had adapted during their temporal displacement, developing neural pathways that could directly process electromagnetic transmissions. "They're scared," Ryu continued, her eyes unfocused as she listened to transmissions no one else could hear. "Their admiral is ordering all ships to concentrate fire on us before we can deploy our time weapon." Han smiled faintly. "They still don't understand." The view screen showed the Zendari fleet opening fire, dozens of energy beams and projectiles, converging on the Retribution. But instead of evasive maneuvers, Han guided the ship directly into the barrage. Back on the station, Dr. Choi watched in horror. "They're going to be destroyed." The weapons fire reached the Retribution and passed through it as if the massive ship wasn't there. Some beams seemed to bend around the hull, others simply vanished on contact. "Phase shifting," Park explained. "The ship can temporarily exist slightly out of alignment with conventional reality. Their weapons can't touch what isn't fully there." The Retribution continued its approach, accelerating toward the Zendari formation. The enemy vessels scrambled to regroup, firing continuously with increasingly desperate salvos. Han's fingers danced across her console, her movements so precise they appeared choreographed. To her perception, time flowed differently. She could see the trajectory of each enemy weapon seconds before it fired, plotting intercept courses that seemed impossible. "Ready for countermeasures," she announced. "Temporal displacement field, at full capacity." The space around the Retribution began to warp visibly. Rings of distorted reality expanded outward from the ship like ripples in a pond. On the station, the view screen struggled to display what was happening. The image flickered and jumped as the cameras attempted to process the impossible scene. "What are you doing to them?" Choi whispered. When the first wave reached the nearest Zendari vessels, they simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged. They froze in place, energy weapons still firing, but the beams suspended in space, unmoving. "Time. Bubble," Park said matter-of-factly. "A localized field where time passes at approximately 1/1,000,000th normal speed. For them, a second will take nearly 2 weeks to experience." The Retribution continued forward, methodically catching each enemy ship in separate temporal fields. Within minutes, the entire Zendari battle group hung motionless in space, like insects trapped in amber. Ryu's voice came over the comms. "Captain, I've intercepted their emergency broadcasts. The Zendari Supreme Command is in chaos. They're ordering an immediate all-out assault on human colonies. They're activating something called Protocol Extinction." Park's expression hardened. "As we predicted, they're panicking." Dr. Choi stared at the suspended ships, his scientific mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. "How long will they remain frozen?" "We can release them whenever we choose," Park replied. "Or never. The fields are self-sustaining now." Han guided the Retribution in a slow circle around the immobilized fleet, almost a victory lap. The ship's hull rippled with patterns of light that seemed to flow like liquid mathematics across its surface. "You realize what this means?" Choi said, his voice shaking. "With this technology, humanity could become the dominant force in the galaxy. No species could stand against us." Park's gaze was distant, as if seeing something beyond the present moment. "That's one possible future. We've lived through that timeline, Doctor. It doesn't end well for anyone." From the Retribution, Ryu's voice came again, more urgent now. "Captain, the Zendari are mobilizing their entire fleet. They're targeting civilian populations. First wave launches in 6 hours. Then we have preparation to do," Park replied calmly. "Dr. Choi, please inform the Commonwealth Council that the demonstration is complete, and that we need to discuss the next phase of our plan." As the scientist hurried away, Park looked once more at the frozen Zendari ships. In the reflection of the viewport, her eyes briefly showed echoes of the countless timelines she had witnessed, futures where humanity triumphed, failed, evolved, or perished. The burden of that knowledge weighed on her more heavily than any military command. The Retribution had returned not just with impossible technology, but with impossible choices. The Commonwealth. Defense Station Aegis 7 exploded in a blinding flash, debris scattering across the void. It was the third outpost to fall in the last hour. The Zendari fleet had emerged from multiple jump points simultaneously, hundreds of warships targeting human colonies and military installations in a coordinated attack that overwhelmed defensive positions. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Park watched the tactical display with an expression carved from stone. Commonwealth casualties were mounting by the minute. Millions of civilians were in the path of the Zendari advance. "They're not even taking prisoners," Commander Kim reported grimly. "Pure extermination protocol." Security Chief Minho Bayek stood, rigidly at his station, his scarred hands clenched into fists. Unlike most of the crew, Bayek's temporal experiences had left visible marks, fractal patterns etched into his skin from timelines where he died protecting the ship, only to be reborn in the next iteration. "We have the power to end this," Bayek said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "One strike at their homeworld. We could eliminate their species just as they're trying to eliminate ours." Captain Park said nothing, her eyes fixed on the display. As another human outpost vanished from existence, Tactical Officer Jin Woo Song approached with the data crystal. "I've completed the targeting calculations, Captain." His voice was eerily calm. "The temporal cascade weapon is ready. If deployed against the Zendari homeworld, it would create a recursive time loop. Their entire star system would experience the same 5 seconds of existence repeatedly for approximately 23 million years." The bridge fell silent. Even for a crew that had witnessed countless horrors across multiple timelines, the proposed weapon represented a line they had not yet crossed. "That's genocide," Medical Officer Sung Minho said quietly from her station. She had been monitoring the crew's biometrics, tracking the subtle changes in their neural patterns as the battle unfolded. We would be erasing an entire civilization. They're trying to erase ours, Beck countered, stepping forward. His skin briefly flickered with ghostly afterimages, echoes of all the deaths he'd experienced in the fracture. I've died 3,542 times at Zendari hands. Across every timeline where we show mercy, they eventually regroup and attack again. They will never stop until humanity is extinct. The tactical display updated, showing 5 more human outposts under heavy attack. Commonwealth Defense Forces were fighting valiantly, but were hopelessly outmatched by the sheer number of Zendari vessels. The evacuation transports from Colony Theta won't escape in time, Kim noted grimly. 80,000 civilians, Park finally spoke. Position us to intercept. Maximum velocity. The Retribution responded instantly, its impossible engines flaring, with energy that bent space around the ship. They crossed 3 light-years in seconds, emerging directly between the Zendari attack fleet and the fleeing civilian transports. As weapons fire from 30 Zendari cruisers converged on the Retribution, the ship's hull rippled and distorted, absorbing or deflecting the assault. Temporal shield holding, Song reported. Enemy weapons having no effect. Beck stepped closer to Park, his voice low. Captain, we could deploy a localized version of the Cascade weapon right now. Target just these ships. Show them what happens. When they attack humans. Before Park could respond, Medical Officer O approached with her own data tablet. Captain, you need to see this. The screen displayed complex neural patterns, brain scans of the Retribution's crew. Our cognitive patterns are continuing to evolve. The temporal exposure has fundamentally altered how we process reality. Park studied the data. Your point? The decision we make here doesn't just affect the Zendari, O explained. It determines what we become. In the timelines where we choose extermination, she didn't need to finish. They had all seen those futures where humanity, armed with the Retribution's technology, became conquerors worse than the Zendari had ever been. The ship shuddered as it absorbed another barrage from the enemy fleet. Outside, the civilian transports were using the distraction to escape, their engines straining at maximum power. Engineer Jion Kwan's voice came over the comm system. Captain, the temporal sensor array is active. We're reading timeline divergence. Park nodded. Show me. The main view screen split into 2 distinct images, 2 possible futures branching from this very moment. In one, the Retribution unleashed its full power, disintegrating the Zendari fleet in seconds. The cascade continued, spreading across Zendari space, erasing their civilization. Humanity survived, then thrived, then conquered, becoming increasingly ruthless until centuries later, they faced rebellion from other species and turned the temporal weapons upon themselves in a civil war that fractured reality itself. In the second timeline, the outcome was initially less clear, more complex, with both setbacks and progress. But humanity endured, evolved, and eventually created a lasting peace that included reformed Zendari factions. The future isn't fixed, Kwan explained, her voice echoing slightly as if coming from multiple moments simultaneously. But our actions create momentum towards certain outcomes. Captain Park stood, drawing all eyes on the bridge. For a brief moment her form seemed to blur, as if multiple versions of herself were trying to make different decisions. Prepare the temporal displacement field, she ordered. But not for the homeworld. Beck stepped forward. Captain, we're not exterminating their species, Park cut him off. But we will end this war today. She turned to Song. Target their command ships, selective temporal isolation, freeze their admirals, their generals, their decision-makers. Then we target their weapons facilities. And their bioweapon research stations, Kim added, understanding dawning on his face. Disable their capacity to wage war without destroying their civilization. The tactical display updated as Song input the new targeting parameters. Thousands of specific locations across Zendari space, highlighted in sequence. This will take precise coordination, Song warned. We'll need to synchronize temporal fields across multiple star systems simultaneously. Can it be done? Park asked. Engineer Quan nodded. The ship's computational systems can handle it, but we'll be pushing our technology to its limits. Outside, the Zendari vessels continued their relentless assault on the Retribution, not realizing that their weapons were useless against the phase-shifted hull. What about the fleets currently attacking our colonies? Beck demanded, still unconvinced. We disable them first, Park replied, but we leave them away home. We show them that we could have destroyed them utterly, but chose not to. The temporal sensor array flickered, the dual futures wavering as the probability lines shifted in response to Park's decision. Prepare for temporal coordination, Park ordered, her voice steady with resolve. All hands to battle stations. Engineer Quan, divert all available power to the displacement field generators. As the crew rushed to their positions, Park turned to look once more at the tactical display, at the human colonies fighting desperately for survival, at the Zendari fleets pressing their advantage, at the precipice upon which all their futures balanced. The Zendari wanted to erase us from time, she said quietly. Instead, they gave us the power to reshape it. Let's show them and ourselves what kind of future we choose to create. The Retribution emerged above the Zendari homeworld like a dark star, its hull shimmering with energy patterns never before seen in this part of the galaxy. The planet below teemed with 30 billion lives, scientists, artists, children, elders, all now at the mercy of a ship that could rewrite the fabric of reality. In orbit, the Zendari defense fleet had assembled their entire remaining armada. Over 500 warships formed a protective shell around their homeworld. It was an impressive display of military might, and utterly futile. On the Retribution's bridge, navigator Hyejin Nam's fingers hovered over her console, which glowed with coordinates and calculations beyond conventional mathematics. Course plotted. Captain, Nam announced. Her eyes reflected multiple realities simultaneously as she perceived possible flight paths across dimensions rather than just through space. We can position ourselves inside their orbital defense network without disrupting any of their vessels. Captain Park nodded. Proceed. The massive warship simply shifted. One moment it faced the Zendari fleet, the next it had bypassed their entire defensive line without moving through the intervening space. The Retribution now hovered directly above the Zendari capital city, casting its shadow over the governmental complex. Across the planet, billions of Zendari looked up in terror as alarms blared. Their mightiest weapons targeted the human vessel, preparing to sacrifice their own capital if necessary. They're preparing to fire, Commander Kim reported calmly. All planetary defense systems activated. Security Chief Bayek stood rigidly at his station. Last chance to reconsider, Captain. We've chosen our path, Park replied firmly. Navigator Nam, initiate the sequence. Nam activated a series of commands. The Retribution's hull began to pulse with concentric rings of energy that expanded outward, washing over the planet below. Where the energy touched Zendari technology, systems simply deactivated, weapons powered down, defense shields collapsed. Communications networks went silent. Within 30 seconds, the entire technological infrastructure of the Zendari homeworld had been neutralized, without a single casualty. Selective technological inhibition field established, Nam confirmed. Their defensive capabilities are neutralized, but medical systems and life support remain functional. Park turned to Communications Officer Ryu. Open a channel to the Zendari High Command. On the main view screen, the image of Supreme Commander Keswick appeared, the architect of the extinction campaign against humanity. His reptilian features were tense with barely controlled fury and fear. What have you done to us? He demanded. We've shown restraint, Park replied simply. Your civilization exists because we choose to allow it. Your people live because we refuse to become what you are. The Zendari leader's eyes narrowed. If you expect gratitude, we expect negotiation, interrupted diplomat Wu Jin Shin, stepping forward. Unlike most of the crew, Shin had experienced the temporal fracture differently. Instead of combat scenarios, he had lived through countless diplomatic encounters, learning the subtle nuances of every species' negotiation tactics across potential futures. "We will be sending a delegation to your capital in 1 hour," Shin continued. "You will accept Commonwealth terms for immediate cessation of hostilities. This is not a request." As the communication ended, the bridge crew watched the planet below. The Zendari, robbed of their military advantage, had no choice but to prepare for the arrival of human diplomats. "Will they honor any treaty?" Beck asked, skeptically. "In how many timelines did they break their word?" "Many," Shin acknowledged, "but we've changed the equation. They've seen what we're capable of, and what we chose not to do." Hours later, in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Zendari, capital, the peace delegation gathered. The Commonwealth representatives watched in amazement as diplomat Shin negotiated terms that would have been unthinkable days earlier. Complete disarmament of the Zendari military, supervision of their research facilities, integration into the Commonwealth with probationary status. Ethics Officer Daehyun Yu stood to address the assembled delegates, his presence commanding despite his quiet demeanor. Throughout their time in the fracture, Yu had dedicated himself to a single question: what should humanity become with such power? "The technology of the retribution will be shared," Yu announced, "but not indiscriminately. We have established the Temporal Ethics Commission, which will evaluate all applications of these advancements." He activated a holographic display showing selected technologies, medical innovations that could extend lifespan, clean energy systems that drew power from multiple dimensions, transportation methods that would unite the far-flung human colonies without the dangers of conventional faster-than-light travel. "What you see here represents 0.2% of what we've developed," Yu explained. "The rest must be introduced gradually, with careful consideration of the societal impacts." As the negotiations concluded, Captain Park stood alone on an observation platform overlooking the alien city. The Zendari civilians below were cautiously returning to their routines, their fear gradually giving way to wary curiosity about their new status in the galaxy. Medical Officer O joined her, carrying data readings from the crew's latest neural scans. "The changes are accelerating," O said quietly. "Our cognitive patterns are continuing to evolve. Soon, some of us may not be recognizably human anymore." Park nodded, unsurprised. "We knew this might happen." "The crew is frightened," O admitted. "We've saved humanity, but we may not be able to rejoin it. What place is there for beings who experience reality as we do?" Before Park could answer, Navigator Nam approached. Unlike earlier, her movements now seemed almost ethereal, as if she was partially present in multiple realities simultaneously. "We've been discussing possibilities," Nam said. "Those of us who are changing the most rapidly. There are regions of space where the laws of physics operate differently, places where beings like us might belong." Park studied her navigator's face, seeing both her loyal crew member and the transhuman entity she was becoming. "You want to leave," Park realized. "Some of us need to," Nam replied gently, "but others will stay to guide humanity through this transition, to ensure the knowledge is used wisely." Park looked out at the alien city, then up at the stars above. The burden of command had never felt heavier, yet she understood. Their sacrifice had saved humanity, but the price was their connection to the very species they had protected. The retribution will remain as guardian and guide, Park decided, but those who need to seek their own path, I understand. As the Zendari sun set over the capital, casting long shadows across the ancient alien architecture, the crew of HSS Retribution faced their final and most personal mission, finding their place in a future they had sacrificed everything to create. They had returned as heroes and saviors, but their journey was far from over. Beyond the known galaxy, new frontiers awaited beings who existed between moments, between possibilities, pioneers of a different kind of humanity that would someday bridge the gap between what was and what could be. The ND.